Okay, good morning. So we're starting a new Siman Shin Tes Zayin, and we're learning the halachas of Tzeidah. So just by way of introduction, a few points. Number one, Tzeidah is an Av Melacha. It's one of the 39 Melachas. Where did you see Tzeidah, trapping, in the Mishkan? So there are two possibilities. One, Rashi in Shabbos Ayin Gimel says that the tachash, the animal, was used to make the leather covering for the Mishkan. So they would trap the animal and then shecht it and skin it, and that would be used for the covering of the Mishkan. And the Orach says in Shin Tes Zayin, Sif Aleph, that Halach Aleph, that the chilazim was used to produce the tcheles. And therefore you got two reasons how you have tzeidah in the Mishkan. Now, how do you define it? Any action which causes a living creature to be closely confined is called tzeidah. And that includes capturing by hand or confining it to a room or setting a trap on Shabbos. That would all be called, if you excuse the pun, by tzeidah. It would all be under the umbrella of tzeidah. And we'll see that in order for it to be tzeidah deraisa, you need certain conditions. One condition is that the animal must be healthy, it must be free, it can't be injured, for example, we'll see. Number two is that the aim is to use the trap creature. So for example, for the meat or for the skin or something like that. Number three, it's got to be minoi notzud. Minoi notzud means that you normally use that animal. So for example, a rabbit, a deer, a parrot, these are animals that you would trap. But a fly, you wouldn't normally, that's not minoi notzud. So therefore it reduces it to a drabonon. We'll see this, all this will come out. And also it's got to be proper, for it to be a deraisa, it's got to be very close confinement. We'll see here, it's got to be shchia achas. You don't have to rest in between attempts to catch it, the way the Mishnah Berurah describes it. So again, tzeidah, starting this new siman, it's an Av Melacha, it's one of the 39 Melachas. You see it in the Mishkan either because they would trap animals to make leather to cover the Mishkan. That's how Rashi says. Or the Orach says that it's the chilazon was produced tcheles, and therefore you're trapping the chilazon. That's where it's found in the Mishkan, and it's defined as any action causing a living creature to be closely confined is considered tzeidah. And for it to be tzeidah deraisa, there's got to be four conditions. Number one, the creature must be healthy and free, not sick or something like that. The aim is to use the trapped creature, either the skin or the meat. Number three, it's minei notzud. It's this type of animal which people generally trap, deer, rabbits, things like that, as opposed to little insects. You don't normally trap that. And then fourth, it's got to be in close confinement, shchia achas, as we'll see. Okay, so now let's launch in. In order for it to be a deraisa, it's got to be all these four things. We'll see, of course, there's going to be tzeidah drabonon, which we'll talk about. Okay, says the Mechaber, Hatzod tzipor derair la migdol. A person traps a bird which is like a free bird, drawer. It's not sort of already trapped. La migdol, into some sort of cabinet or something. Shehu notzud boy, that is now trapped. Or shar tziporim utzvi lebayis, or other birds, or a deer, lebayis, or lebevar, or into some sort of enclosure, sheim nitzoidim boy, that they are now trapped in there. Chayev, that is an issa deraisa of tzeidah on Shabbos. V'im ein nitzod boy, but if it's not trapped in there, pata aval osa, then it's only osa midrabanan. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Hainu, sheposach shar hamigdol, you opened up this cupboard, v'osa tachbulois ad shenichnet satzipa l'soichai, v'soga olav, and you do some sort of trick or strategies that you get the bird to go inside, v'sogar olav, and you close it. Now, interestingly, if you look at footnote number 1, at the beginning, he says that the Shulchan Aruch says in Sif Hey further on, even if you don't do these clever tricks to encourage the animal to come in. In other words, even if but the animal walked in itself, and you then go and close the door, so it's lav dafka that you're the one who's saying, sort of this way, come over here, and or encouraging it, hanging up a carrot or whatever they eat, and it'll go into that room or that cupboard, and then you close the door. But even if it just walks in itself and you close the door, there's an issa of tzeidah. Okay, continue the Mishnah Berurah. Even if you didn't touch it, you just close the door. Ki besagre hamigdal nigmar hatzeda. By closing the door of the cupboard and the bird has gone inside, you've now done the issa of tzeda, the malach of tzeda. But if you bring it into the house, afilu b'habayis cotton, even if it's a fairly small house, even if the windows are closed, it's not still yet, it's not considered trapped yet. Because the nature of an independent bird which is not domesticated is not going to listen to you. And he'll run around like he does in the field. He's running around, you can't catch it. So if you trap the animal into your house, that still is not a deraisa because it's still lacking being trapped. You've still got to chase after it inside the house. Okay, lemigdal, what is that? Shalates, it's some sort of wooden cabinet. V'nasek kluv godel. It's made like, it becomes some sort of cage, a large cage. Or biva mikri karpifos hamukavin legalashom. There's sort of these small enclosures. So you trap the animal into an enclosure, that becomes a cage for it and it's trapped. Ushat siparim utzvi, and the Mechaber carried on and said, if in other birds, larger birds, utzvi and a deer labais, a lebiva or some sort of enclosure, then you're chayev for tzeidah on Shabbos. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Sifkat Gimel, it's starting Ketani. You got to learn it two different ways. I.e., siparim, when it comes to the birds, v'chein b'shar oifus, ein chayev atshiyah bivra v'habayis mekoira. For a bird, then it's got to be a sealed enclosure. In other words, there's got to be a roof on it. For gam chalanos of sumin, and the windows have also got to be shut. Sheyochel livrach derech sham, because otherwise it will be able to fly out. Of its tzvi, but when it comes to a deer or shachayas and other animals, chayav afilu einu moker v'gam chalanos of pesuchin. But if you trap a deer into a small enclosure, so even if it's not roofed, and even if the windows are open, that's not a problem. It's not going to jump out. So it depends on the type of the animal. Okay, Shehem Nitzoidim. La Fuke says the Mishnah Berurah, Sif Cotton Dalet. La Fuke to exclude im abayis al godel. If the house is very large, she'ein yochayim letofso b'shchia achas, that you can't catch it in one attempt, in one swoop. Haynu b'ritza achas. El tzorich linofesh kodim sheyagienu. You got to rest in between each attempt. Lo mikrit seida deraisa afshu makura. So if if it's running around the house and it's a larger area, and you can't get it in one swoop, it's not such a small confined place, then that's not a tzeidah deraisa. And therefore, the flip side is, if it goes into a house and you haven't done a ma'aseh tzeidah because it's a largish place and it's still running around and you won't be able to get it b'shchia achas, so that's the first half of the story. But the second half of the story is that once you're inside the house and then you trap it, that's tzeidah deraisa, because it's not called trapped yet. So just to clarify, if let's say you take a deer or a rabbit or something, and it goes into a house, if you close the door of that house, have you done the malacha of tzeidah? The answer is no, because it's not trapped inside the house. Maybe in Issa D'Rabbanan, but it's not Issa D'Oraisa, because it's only in Issa D'Oraisa if it's now trapped. But if it's in a big house where it's running around, so it's not trapped, because it's lacking tzeidah. But once it's inside the house, and then you go and trap it, and you take it and you put it into some sort of net, or you put it into a small cupboard, now you've done a ma'aseh tzeidah. That's the point. Because mashenkin, once it's trapped, then you can't trap it again. Once it's trapped, it's trapped.
What's the get of it being trapped when its legs can't move or when it can't?
Yeah, I guess when it can't run away anymore. Yeah. Ritzach means one go, and it's a small area. It must be. It depends on the size of the animal.
It's like a rabbit is different.
You're right. Yeah, exactly. Va'ayin lekamal Mishnah Berurah Sif Cotton Unches. Hashoyle dag min hayom. If you scoop up a fish from the sea, l'toich sefer shamayim, into some sort of bucket of water, chayev to have it seder, because now the fish can't swim away, and you've now caught a fish, and that is a melacha of tzeidah. But if you sort of place it into a larger pool of water, so it's still mechus tzeidah. Shegam sham nishma l'chern l'stokin, because it can sort of slip away, and you haven't properly trapped it. It can go into various nooks and crannies. V'ayin lekama Mishnah Berurah Sif Cotton Lamed Gimel Hatzod Ari, because if you trap a lion, ein lechayev achiach nisena lekipa shelo yishu nesaba, because it's got to be properly trapped. So a lion, it's got to be in the cage, locked door, for it to be considered trapped. Because if it can still get away, then it's not considered trapped. Well, so to this fish, if it's in a little bucket where there's nowhere to go and you can just pick it out, then you've done seder. But if it's in a larger enclosure where the fish is still sort of swimming around and can squirm away from you, so you haven't done a ma'aser seder.
That's not together for an animal. For an animal, it's just if it can still move around. If it's in a bucket, water can still swim around.
Yeah, but it's a small bucket. You just put your hand in and take it out.
If a deer's in a house, you can get it much more easily, even if it.
So it's got to be a small enough room so the deer can't just squirm away. The definition is shchia achas. It's got to be one swoop you can get it. That's it's now caught. Okay, but if Eina Nitzid Boy is not completely caught there, then it's Potav al Osa. The Mishnah the Mechaber says, Sif Cotton Hay, Al Kola Sif Koi. This is going on the whole Sif. Valkain Tzipper Drar, a non-domesticated bird, Shenichnes Labayas Derech HaPesach Chalon, that flies into a house through a door or window, Afal Gav, She'eina Nitzid Shomik, even though he's not trapped, because imagine a pigeon flies into here. So it's not trapped, it's still flying around. Mikol Mokum also Liskar HaPesach Chalon. Still, Midrabanon, it's also to close the door or the window. If you take a look at footnote number 5, v'mabayis gadol ma'od, if the house is very big, at she'ein ha'odam margish abal Chaim nimtze b'shlitoso, that you haven't got it under control, das hagon Misen Karelitz. And now you got to flip to the back. So Misen Karelitz says, it goes to page 40 at the back. I'll just read it to you. If it's so large that closing the door is not even Isra Rabbanan. So, for example, a pigeon walks into this, flies into this space of medrash, and you can then close the window. So you haven't really done a ma'aser seder because it's just flying around. If it's a very large house, it's no different if it's outside or inside or something like that. Could be. That's the point he's making for number 5.
Again, what's the fine?
Yeah. In a chalami. So the chances of getting it inside the house, outside the house are the same. Yeah, which I think for all of us is pretty low. But Vizman Hakar. Now, what if an animal walked in the front door and you're cold? You want to shut the front door, but doing so is going to trap it. Vizman Hakar, sheyesh tsar tzino tsar acher. There's some other distress, if it's cold or whatever. So the Chai Adam says, if your intention is just to make sure there's no draft coming through and to save you being cold, and you don't care about the bird being trapped, given the ein boit seda deraisa, afal gav to have a psik ratio b'drabonon. And even though you've closing the doors, could be a psik ratio b'drabonon, nevertheless it would be okay. Because it's b'shach tzina legoz drabonon. But if other animals where there is seda deraisa, also afal gav she'en mechavin klal to have a psik ratio. So it depends very much on if the Seder is Deraisa Drabonon. So if it's a Drabonon, then you're allowed to close the door if you're cold. But if it's a Deraisa, then it won't be allowed. Okay, let's do one more sif. Hatzod tzvi yoshen oisumo chayev. If you trap a deer who is sleeping or who is blind, chayev, you are still chayev. Chiger oichoyle oizokein pata. But if the animal is lame or sick in some way, oizokein is old and therefore can't run, pata, because you've caught an animal that was already trapped, as it were. It's not going to be able to run away. Let's just do the Mishnah Berurah till there. Hatzot tzvi. Hu adin sham minim. So to other animals. V'chein kosav el yirabah. V'ayim behalocha. Yoshen usuma. Dahani darkon ishamit. If they're just sleeping, or if they're blind, so they still can run away, because as soon as you touch it or go close to it, it will wake up and it will run away. As soon as the hand of a human being goes close to it or touches it, then even if it's sleeping or if it's blind, the animal will still run away. And therefore, when you trap it, this is proper tzeidah. If the animal is lame or is sick or is old, that is not able physically to escape, even if the lame animal can move a little bit, you'll still be able to get it with one swoop. Therefore, they're considered already trapped, and therefore you'll be potter for that. Says Mishnah Berurah, or if it's very young and therefore it's not able to walk yet. So that's the Rambam. The cotton mikri kedim sheyochel loretz kein kosa hamiri. Okay, potter. So in those situations, if you trap an animal which is sleeping or tsuma, then you're chayev, because the nature of that animal is to run away when you get close to it. But a chayla or a chiger or a zaken, you're potter. Says the Mishnah Berurah, aval osa. It's still osa midrabanan. Al kain kishemoitzi lefamim arneves chayla munachas ala derech, and therefore if you have like an injured rabbit on the road, even though the animal can't move, also likache, so you can't touch it, because it may not be a deraisa, but it's still also midrabanan. V'yesh orim dechayev, and some even say that you could be chayev for that. V'ayim be'halacha belav hochi also likach oisa mishum muktzah. And aside from anything else, the animal is muktzah. Now, what about if you got sort of insects on your clothes and things like that? Lice, or if you've got something like that. So if you take a look at footnote 10, interesting machlikas. Lahitzi kinim min begodav l'zarkon, to de-lice a beged, to take off some lice from the beged and throw them away. Kosva Shulchan Aruch in Siftes Shemuta. Ubir hatil l'David she'ein bekach isat seder. There's no isat seder of taking the kinim off the lice off your clothes, mishum shekal l'tovsam, because they're very easy to catch. Ve'ein hein mechusar seder. They're not lacking seder. Or lefichach yesh lahatil asas kein kimin she'ein b'minin nutzad. V'das hagonim shem zaman arbach she'ein bohem bichlal isat seder mishum shetfisas ba'alei chaim ein nechshavas l'seder ela kasher kosh l'tovsam. Number one, it's not minei nutzad. If it's deer or parrots or rabbits, these are things which people trap. But lice, people don't just trap lice. That's not what they do. So it's drabonin anyway. Number two, it's not considered seder because they're easy to catch. Masha'enkein bekinim shekala tovson v'kol hatirchi nemotzon, is the tirch is to find them, but not to trap them. V'chein hayra, and so too that's how Rabbi Shlomo Zalman paskins she'lucha itzi b'kagoyin lemola itzov, that any animal bali chaim which crawl very slowly, for example an ant, right, which just crawls and creeps, or machmas kein nitvasu b'kalos, therefore it's very easy to catch. She'mutar l'tofsa, you're allowed to catch it. Ach lo yitfasena b'yodoi mishum issa mukta. So if you got a fly or something like that, and you want to just put it into like a plastic cup and then just take it, so then there's no issa tzeder. You may have problems with mukta. However, if you carry on, the next paragraph, me'idach b'Rabbeinu Yerucham, lizards and worms and things, even though the worm just crawls really slowly, it's very easy to catch them. That you are chayev for slow moving creatures. That's just how it goes. I think it contracts. So regarding catching, trapping a slow-moving animal, that's a machlokes haposkim whether you're allowed to do that or not. Okay, let's just finish off. Hamashase kelev, back to the Ramah. Hamashase kelev, if you incite a dog achar chaya b'Shabbos to catch an animal, havet seder, that is considered seder. Even though you don't do any ma'aseh seder directly, you're just encouraging a dog to do the seder. That would be a problem. V'yesh omrim after b'chol also lotzut b'klovim mishum moshav leitzim. Just hanging out with sort of trapping animals and doing that sort of activity is not the best way to spend your time. Says the Mishnah Berurah Sifkot and Yud, Havet Seder, Hainu, Imloi also ba'atzme ma'aseh klal. So even if you're not doing a ma'aseh yourself, Rak b'masha shisse es hakelev v'hakelev tofsa, you're inciting the dog, encouraging the dog, and the dog catches the animal, Haverak Seder midrabanan. That is Seder midrabanan. V'im also ba'atzme gam kein ma'aseh lezen. If you do an action, kagoin shebarach hatzvi min hakelev. For example, the deer runs away from the dog, and the deer is very tired, and therefore you're doing an action, then that will be Seder Gemurah. If you just stand in front of it and confuse it, until the dog comes and catches it, told it that Seder Mechayev. That is called trapping, that's how you do it. Moshav Leitzim. But and there are those, V'yesh Omrim, says the Ramah, that don't get involved in trapping animals and this sort of activity because of Moshav Leitzim. And look what he says in Yud Aleph, quite strong. If your person is involved in Moshav Leitzim, which could be trapping animals and hunting and these sort of things, then Eina Zeicha L'Simchas Levyason is not going to be Zeicha to the Simcha of Mashiach when we have the Sudas Levyason. If you look at 13, he quotes the famous Noda Yehuda. If that's your job, that you trap animals, then you're talking to mutter. And he goes, it's famous Noda Yehuda, who was asked by someone, is he allowed to hunt animals? He's got a very large estate, and he wants to, on a Sunday afternoon, he wants to go. No, it wasn't London, it was in Europe. This is a long time ago. And someone wrote to the Noda Yehuda. Was it from London, the Shaila? Yeah, it could be, I didn't know that. I can't remember the Shaila. Okay, wherever it was from, whether it was London or whether it was in Europe, it was all in Europe, so we're covered. Yeah, so anyway, the case of the guy was a wealthy fellow, he had a big estate and he wanted to do it. So he asked if a Jew is allowed to do that. So the Noda Yehuda was not too pleased. He said, look, mitzad Chaim, he says there's no, mitzad bal tashchis, there's no problem. Because if you're getting hana from it, if that's your thing, then what difference is it if you eat it, if you use it in some way where there's a proper hana? But he felt that he was not pleased, and he says, there's the people who hunt in Tanakh are not, Esav was a hunter, right? And Mishum Tzar B'Alechaim and things like that. So overall, but if it's your parnasa and if there's a te'eles, then there's no problem, he said. Yeah, it's outside. Yeah, it's outside. Absolutely. So just to summarize, what have we said? That the Issa Tzeder it's an Issa Deraisa, either in the Mishkan to use leather to cover the Mishkan, or for the Chilazon to produce Tchelas, and any action to a living creature to closely confine it is an Issa Tzeder, and there are 4 conditions for Seder Deraisa. The animal must be well and healthy. To use the trap creature for the meat, it's got to be minay notzud, which means you normally trap these types of animals, rabbits, parrots, deer, etc. But a fly or insects not. That would be a job on them. And it's got to be b'shcheach, it's got to be in close confinement. And but if it's still sort of free inside that area, then it's not considered Seder Deraisa. Okay, we'll leave it at that.